crew to today's session with Cindy Laufer and Jennifer Wampler. We're delighted you're here. My name's Tim Sweeney. I'm a senior fellow at the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership. And I just want to provide a very brief welcome. We're glad you're here and give you a little background on how we've arrived here today. So at the beginning of COVID, the Midwest Center and the folks at UMKC really knew that we have a valuable community of learners and people who take seriously the study of nonprofit management and fundraising. And they determined that we need to maintain an avenue for us to connect and learn and share ideas together, especially in these turbulent times. So they came up with the idea of the navigation series. So really for Tuesdays, every other Tuesday since March or April, we've been doing the navigation series, providing an opportunity for nonprofit leaders to gather together and share ideas, to learn together. Probably about 4 months ago, a small group of us gathered to talk about specifically fundraising and how we could share ideas and content around fundraising, since it's really quite obvious that during the pandemic, fundraising is playing a central role in fueling our nonprofits. It always has, but it's particularly important now as nonprofits face such financial challenges. So that's how we've arrived to today. Today's session, as I said, is going to be led by Cindy and Jennifer. I'm going to turn it over to them in just 1 second. I wanted to provide a few kind of housekeeping issues. One is always in these Zoom calls, if you could keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking, that'd be great. The second thing is Monica Razak. Monica, would you raise your hand and let everyone see your face for 1 second? She's always bashful about this, isn't she? Or she's probably off getting coffee and has muted her phone. Oh, there she is. There she is. There's Monica. She's a staff and senior fellow at the Midwest Center herself. She is going to keep an eye on the chat. So if you have any questions throughout the session, you'd prefer not to voice them yourself, just put it down in the chat. Monica will read those, consolidate them if necessary, and give voice to them. So thanks, Monica, for playing that role. And then Jennifer and Cindy have told me they are happy to receive questions throughout the session. So if you have something that you want to surface, as I said, just put it in the chat so Monica can give voice to it, or you can unmute yourself and share your question or thought with the whole group. So on that note, we're delighted to be in this small group with you to share ideas and to learn from one another. And I'm going to turn it over to our speakers, Cindy and Jennifer.
Good morning. Thanks, Tim. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint here and let's see where, okay. Okay. So how do you let those that make the financial decisions, make policy decisions, how do you let them know about the work you're doing? When you learn of new funding sources, new funding streams that come available, when you hear of policies that maybe are being examined, how do you let those making those decisions know about your mission, know about the lives of those people that you serve? Advocacy and lobbying are some of the things that can help you to do that. Advocacy, and especially lobbying, with legal threats looming over, or just not even knowing what they might be, just put that potential out there, can seem daunting and even dangerous. Jennifer and I hope today that after the next hour that maybe you'll be a little more comfortable, a little more confident in trying some of these practices. Marcia, this is a quote from Marcia Abner, a proper role for nonprofits. She's talking about advocacy. Marcia Abner is a leader in nonprofit advocacy. And I was going to show, I don't know if I should have done it better than this, but I have her book here. It's a great book, more of a workbook. And we've used some of that book to inform today's sessions. But we agree with Marsha Abner's quote here that these practices are a proper role for nonprofits. I think a lot of times nonprofits think that they shouldn't dabble in this, and they're afraid to because there's all those rules about lobbying, and you can lose your status if you do it wrong, and so you just kind of stay away from it. But advocacy and lobbying can strengthen your nonprofit's ability to actually carry out your mission. So today we're going to focus mostly on advocacy. We will talk about how to get started in the process if you have not already done that, sort of how you set yourself up for that. And that's not a small task. And then ongoing practices to kind of create that culture within your organization of speaking and educating on your mission's behalf. And I do have to give a little shout out here. So this is actually the town hall where I grew up in Massachusetts. And this and the church across the street were the town and are pretty much still the town. So it's a very small town, but you still probably have to advocate to this town because it's, this is the town center. So this is Jennifer and I. I'm Cindy. I guess I should have said that up front. For those of you that don't know me, I'm with the Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership. Jennifer Wampler is the development director at the Kansas City Ballet. As Jennifer and I started talking about what to include, what type of content to talk about today in the navigation series, she just kept telling me stories. And it seemed like a natural way to hold this first session by having her tell you those stories of the advocacy that the ballet has gone through. Jennifer also has some other extensive career in development. So you may hear some stories from besides that, but I think most of it will be on the ballet today. So Jennifer's going to share a case study of the Kansas City Ballet's advocacy practices and maybe a few from other times in her career. I'm going to then follow up with a few lessons learned from her stories. And as Tim said, if you have questions, please write them down. Jennifer and I actually teach some other stuff together, so we're really comfortable and happy to have you. I was going to say interrupt, but just if you want to have a question during it, we're really happy to have you hear that. You can even just unmute yourself and come into it. And so with that said, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Great. Like Cindy said, I'm Jennifer Wampler. I have a 30-year career in nonprofit marketing and development. And most of my career, off and on, has been at Kansas City Ballet, where I'm now Chief Development Officer. As a fundraiser, I'm interested in and need to be proficient in garnering resources from many different sources. This includes, excuse me, whatever funds might be available from government sources. Though, unfortunately for the arts, this is not a lot of money. In order to help change this, though, I felt like I needed to kind of know what was going on and also become a part of that solution. So our case study today is about Kansas City Ballet. But I thought I should give you just a bit of background about the ballet. Kansas City Ballet was founded in 1957, and we are in our 63rd season, though this is a season like we have never experienced before. Our organization employs about 80 people, including professional dancers, teachers, and administrative people. We normally perform 4 times at the Kaufman Center, including a month of performances of the Nutcracker. This year, none of these performances are taking place, which means we are losing over half of our earned revenue and 40% of our total budget. We also have performances in our own building where we have our studios. It's called the Todd Bolander Center for Dance and Creativity. And in this building, which is just west of Union Station, we have an informal 180-seat performance space. Our first show this year is a holiday show, and we will seat about 50 people at each show. We have a school with about 650 students normally. We also have a variety of programs that we present in our community each year, mainly in schools and libraries. And in this photo, you can see a picture of our second company with former Mayor Sly James when we launched our production of Wizard of Oz. We typically receive about 1.5% of our annual revenue from government sources. So with that small amount, you would think that advocacy is not that important to us. But this year, especially, advocacy and the relationships that have been built in the past are even more important than ever. The National Council of Nonprofits has a terrific publication called the Public Policy Planning Checklist that I believe we're going to add to the resources for you. I've used their structure from that checklist to talk about how the ballet has gone about our advocacy work. Of course, real life never follows the guidelines exactly, but this is how public policy advocacy has played out for Kansas City Ballet. So first, Cindy, if you want to forward, there we go. Organizational planning. When you first get started with advocacy for your organization, it's a good idea to do an informal inventory of what your organization may already be doing and what the overall attitude is for advocacy at your organization. Knowing this information will guide you in knowing how easy or difficult it might be for your organization to get involved in advocacy work. At the ballet, I knew that my executive director felt that advocacy was important, but with everything on his plate, he didn't have a lot of time to devote to it, but has been very supportive of my involvement, my growing involvement in it. In order to raise the importance of advocacy with the board, several years ago when the governance committee was looking at bylaws changes, I worked with the chair of the committee and we included a standing advocacy committee. So currently I am the dedicated staff person to work on advocacy. We also have a chair of that board committee, but at this point in time, we don't have any other committee members on that committee. The chair, however, is involved extensively in the city with advocacy through other organizations, knows many elected officials as well as staff in government, so is a really great resource. And should we need to mobilize more of a grassroots effort, he would know what to do. So it's good to be a team with someone on your board. Next is issues planning. In issues planning, it's important to identify the laws, regulations, and external policies and practices that affect the work of your organization. It is equally important to identify the government officials who have influence over these laws and regulations. But doing this alone can seem very daunting and could take an extraordinary amount of time. So the most efficient and effective way to get involved is to get involved with local, state, and/or national advocacy organizations that align with your organization's missions and values. For Kansas City Ballet, those organizations are Arts KC, the Downtown Council, and the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce at local, or more in our, for us, more regional. Missouri Citizens for the Arts is for the state, and Dance USA is our national dance organization, and Americans for the Arts covers all of the arts nationally. I currently serve on the Advocacy Committee for Arts KC, which does policy work regionally. I'm actually able to bring a rather unique perspective to that committee because I live in Kansas and am a member of the Lenexa Arts Council and the advisory board of the Arts Council of Johnson County. But my primary work is for a Missouri-based organization. And Arts KC is more of a regional, has a regional focus. I was also recently voted onto the board of Missouri Citizens for the Arts, and I attend Downtown Council meetings regularly. So what's important in being on these, involved with these organizations? Being involved allows me to hear about issues early on, as well as opportunities that may be brewing in the city, region, county, and state levels. Plus, since my full-time job is to raise contributed revenue for the ballet, I don't have a lot of time, extra time, to delve into policies and bills that are coming before the legislature. and I'm also not a policy wonk. It's not something I stay up late nights reading, is bills coming before the legislature. But these organizations have people who have skill sets that I may not have, and they have the time. It's their job to keep their finger on the pulse of government on a daily basis. Arts KC has a staff person, though not a registered lobbyist, who spends a great deal of time on public policy. The chamber has a lobbyist, and Missouri Citizens for the Arts also has a paid lobbyist. She comes to our board meetings and gives regular updates, and even in between gives updates. She's been with them for 20 years and knows the ins and outs in Jeff City. Being involved with these organizations also lets me hear about the legislative agendas for these organizations. Each organization develops a legislative agenda each year, and it allows me to have input during the planning stages because some organizations don't have all of the arts represented, so it helps me to be able to represent the things that are unique to the ballet. I've found that my involvement in Arts KC and Missouri Citizens, especially, to be beneficial during the pandemic. For example, right now, states, counties, and some cities are trying to figure out how to best spend the CARES Act funds that they received from the federal government a few months ago. And this money needs to be spent before the end of the calendar year. So we can help them figure out how to spend that, and which is one of the things on Missouri Citizens for the Arts plate right now. The third thing is funding resource planning. So Cindy, if you want to forward that. Each year at budget planning time for the ballet, I make sure that memberships for these organizations are included either in the overall organizational budget or in my department budget. The unfortunate thing is when budget times get tight, these membership fees can fall by the wayside. So it's important to keep those going as best you can. I also make sure that I budget for at least one trip per year to Jeff City, which I take, usually Arts KC has an organized bus that goes down for Missouri Citizens for the Arts Day. I also make sure to budget for extra people at our events so that we can accommodate any elected officials who might want to attend. We actually do occasionally get a few who take us up on our invitations. They like dance as well, so that's nice. Okay, next thing is we need to make sure that we educate internal constituents so they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I try to put regular governmental updates on our board meeting agendas for that chair to report on. And then when you have an opportunity for volunteer newsletter or other things, when you're talking to your volunteers, educate them as well on what's important legislatively. And it might not just be about funding. It may be about other policies that are coming down the pike about your area that you're serving. So you want to be able to have volunteers have extensive networks as well, and they've already proven to you they want to help your organization, so they can be a great resource. And then I make sure to update our own staff. So I let our staff know what the latest is and let them know how they can play a role. And this is a great way also to get the word out if there's the need for a grassroots effort. The last thing is, readiness and action planning. So through all this, it's key to remember that you are educating elected officials, that this is not true lobbying. There is a link to another form through that checklist that we put in the chat box that can let you know if you need to do something in addition to, so that you're within the scope of the law. But as long as you are educating elected officials on how what they're doing is affecting your organization, then it's not true lobbying. So I make sure that I'm signed up for all the e-newsletters and alerts from all the organizations that that I mentioned before. And so when there are any alerts or calls to contact legislators, I make sure that I take action on these and pass these action alerts on to others. The action alerts that I get from organizations, they make it very simple for you to send an email to your legislator. Usually you just need to put in your zip code and it pulls up who you need to send emails to. And they may even have a pre-populated form that you can just personalize, which I always do that because it's important that, you know, there are a lot of things within fundraising that talk about storytelling. It's important to do that with legislators too. Tell a short story about how what they're doing is affecting your organization. They will resonate with stories. So these pre-written letters, it's good to personalize them and not make them just a boilerplate. But doing these is really important. I've heard that a legislator, if they get 10 letters on one issue, they will take note. So it really doesn't take that many people to contact a congressman, a senator, state people, city council people on an issue, and they will take note. So I kind of alluded before to traveling to Jeff City. So Legislative Day for the Arts in Jeff City is usually in February and is sponsored by Missouri Citizens for the Arts. And I find these advocacy days to be beneficial on many levels. First, the issues and the materials are always well organized. I don't have to put it together. Missouri Citizens for the Arts has packets already put together for us to distribute, and they organize them by region. So I can go to people I know, or if there aren't people from the other regions who are there that day, I can also fill in for them. It's also a good opportunity to meet other people who are advocating for the same thing you are. It's always good to build that network. And for Missouri Citizens for the Arts Day, they also have an award ceremony that's put on by the Missouri Arts Council. So there's always music and other things going on. So there's a lot of activity, and the legislators know that the arts are in the building. And typically we're not controversial, which is nice. They talk to a lot of people who have more controversial topics, and so they're always happy to see us. So meeting with legislators can take place in a couple of different ways. You can make an appointment ahead of time, and those are always appreciated. Or sometimes it's just as easy to just drop by their office. With either method though, the legislator may or may not be there, because you may be hitting them at a time when they've been called into session or they are in a committee meeting. But it's good to make friends with their assistant, and they will help you know where the legislator is, and also how to get in touch with them. If it's okay to have them called off the floor, sometimes that's fine. Or if they're okay with you calling them out of the committee hearing. A lot of them are fine with that too, because maybe it's not a critical issue that they are are debating or looking at that time. It's also good to try to meet with your local officials outside of their offices, or you can go to their office, but sometimes it's good to meet with them separately just to get to know them as people and not maybe specifically about legislation. Just let them know about your organization, because when they're in session, they don't have a lot of time. So it's good to try and get them when they're not in session, which in Jeff City, they go into session in January and they're in through mid-May. And so it's good to get to know them in the off times as well. They want to know their constituents. They want to know the organizations that are in their areas. So getting to know them on a personal level is really great, and bringing a board member or a constituent with you is even better. When I was at the conservatory at UMKC, these appointments were extremely helpful, and because we were trying to get funding for the downtown campus for the conservatory, and bringing them on tours and getting to know them was really important. So it's also important to invite your specific legislators to events at your organization. They probably won't come because they get a lot of invitations, but it's amazing that they will remember your invitation. One time when we were in the halls in Jeff City, I ran into a state senator, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I get your invitations. I love them." But she had never been to one of our things, but that was fine because she remembered getting the invitation and she remembered Kansas City Ballet. So over time, you will want to develop these relationships to the point, hopefully, that you become a resource for them, because there are a lot of issues, and with term limits, they don't have a lot of time to be able to develop their own body of knowledge on all the things they have to be covering. So they need resources for information on how what they're doing will affect their community. So becoming their resource is the ultimate goal. And that's what I have.
Thanks, Jennifer. As I said, I'm going to kind of just sort of pull out some of the lessons from what Jennifer said, and just a couple lessons just from in general about advocacy mostly. Some of you may know that we look to at the Midwest Center those heavy thought thinkers in the world, and there's the Wayne Gretzky story. For those of you that don't, check with me later. Dave's favorite. But we also kind of get our influences from David Letterman. So I kind of did this top 10 list. I made it a top 9 because I'm not going to just make things up. And I made it go backwards. So that's kind of what this is about. So if you're wondering why, if I really messed it up, that's where I was going with this. So the first thing I want to talk about, here's a list, and we'll show these at the end too, so you have them. But I'm just going to go through these and just kind of pull out some of the lessons that I just heard that I want to point out. So be ready. One of the things that made some of the stories you just heard and some of the activities that Jennifer just described made them, the Kansas City Ballet, able to do these activities is because they were prepared. Preparedness, you hear said, Jennifer used the word readiness, those types of things. So the ballet had plans in place, they had processes in place, they had established their to-do list, what they were going to do, they had a team in place, and then also tracking activities. So having this all in place ahead of time is going to be really key to moving forward. So preparedness could be its own session. We've both talked about it a little bit. Getting this all put together we could talk about for the whole day. So what I'm going to kind of talk about is the things you want to have in place and not so much the how you're going to do it. So the board is one thing that you want to obviously make sure that your board is on is buying into this, is going to participate. Jennifer mentioned that she, takes board members with her periodically to a meeting with people. So having them, agree with the process, it's good for board members to sort of check through your bylaws and make sure that there's not something in there that prohibits some certain activity, or, not many bylaws do specifically talk about advocacy, but maybe you want to do that, especially if you're maybe not one of the more controversial ones. Jennifer said that ballet is not. They're happy to see them. They're an easy one to run into in the hall, but some other organizations not so much. So maybe you do want to have something in there. So just kind of checking on that, but obviously making sure that you don't have anything preventing certain activities. I also really like what Jennifer said about the board, the committee that you might have for your made up of board members. Not a lot of people on the committee, but there is a committee there. There's some people that are focusing on it. So that's another way that you can have the board involved. Creating a team. So with any task that you do within an organization, putting that team together, this team isn't unlike other teams that you have for different things. You're going to want to have, a goal. Gosh, this is not going to go well if I don't quit this. A goal, you're going to want to have assigned duties, assigned roles, who does what, you're going to have accountability. So all these types of things. The types of people who might be involved in this would be your board, possibly your staff. You could have volunteers involved. You could have clients, people that you're serving might be good people to have on here. Let's see. Other people that maybe you're connected to. A couple things that come to mind are like Harvesters has a back snack program, and they partner with a local community agency, maybe a church or a business or something that sort of do the on the grounds work with delivering these backpacks to children every week. They might be a good person to have on. They're kind of seeing a different side of it than the Harvesters, who are delivering the food to the site, but not interacting with the children every week. The Habitat for Humanity has people coming and building houses. They work a lot with the Boy Scouts or different churches. Those types of people might be good to have on a board or on your team. So yes, the team, then you want to have a plan. So you're going to want to have, ideally, and I'll talk more about coalitions and putting it all together later, but you're going to want to have, maybe even a mission for that activity. Definitely a goal, the vision, the strategies, how you want to carry this out. What do you want to educate? Jennifer mentioned education. That's really what we're doing, is we're educating. We're not telling them. That's where the trick comes in, or we're not telling policymakers, decision makers what to do. We're educating them. So what do you want to educate about? What's your issue? Who are you going to educate to? And what do they need to know? That's kind of what your strategy is going to be. And then what will your type look like? Well, what sort of public policy will you do? Will you spend a lot of time with maybe some local people, your city council or your county offices? Maybe that's really who needs to know about what you're doing. Or maybe your reach is different, and maybe you need to talk to a state senator or somebody, whoever represents your district. So who are you going to talk to at what level, and those types of things. Also, you're going to want to be able to track this. So there's a couple different layers of this. The first one is outreach. So systems for tracking this, you're going to want to include in this. This is kind of the system that's going to capture who and how you contact them. So how do you reach these people? It's kind of basically your database of all the people that are going to be involved in this. So the types of people that you would put in this would be, you would capture supporters, you would capture people who care about what you're doing. You'd capture some of those people I just talked about that might be on a team. So any community partners, just that are working with you, any volunteers that are working with you, anybody that cares about you out there. Elected officials who are making the decisions that impact you. Even sometimes there's appointed officials too. So elected officials, appointed officials, we often just say elected. Their staff is really important. I'll talk even more about that, but sometimes that's the way to get into people, is through their staff. And knowing what the route in is going to be important. And then you're going to want to have contact information. So the contact information, any special notes you're going to want, that this might be a place to record that about that person, like maybe their preferences, their pet projects, things like that, anything you would want to know there. And then any maybe preferred communication tools. So maybe somebody really loves to get, like Jennifer said, loves to get your invitations, even though they don't ever come to anything, but they love getting the invitations. Maybe they love your newsletter. Maybe they like to, get email updates your email update every Monday or whatever. Is there some special kind of communication that they like? So any of those types of things you would want to include in that system. A system for tracking issues. You're going to want to set this system up, files. I would imagine most of these will be electronic. What types of, this is where you're going to put your data, sort of the facts about the issues. What publications do you get from that talk about this? Jennifer talked about a lot of different publications and agencies that she deals with because she's in the arts. So those guys have newsletters, they have different things that come out. So what of those do you capture? And putting the information in here. So when you want to know about a certain issue, you can quickly look at it here and get information to then go out and present to other people, to the decision makers. I just recently got something that this reminded me of. I recently got saw a piece from Sharice Davids, who is running for national representative on the Kansas side. And she had she was talking about mental health. And I've got a friend who's trying to start a mental health program facility for people who may be not being served in that area. And I thought, oh, that's great. And so I passed that on to her, making sure she knew that Sharice Davids kind of likes mental health. What am I going to say? Likes good mental health. I'll say that. So that's something that she wants to know, because there's somebody there who cares about what she's doing. The last one is your legislative activity. So you want to capture what you're doing. So again, you're going to have some kind of tracking, some kind of files or something set up. This is going to serve as that historical resource for anybody who comes into your staff, who comes on into this work that you're doing with lobbying and advocacy. It's some place where they can look back in history and see that the issues that you were working on, who was helping you work on them internally, who you talked to externally. It's just a great resource there for people to go. It's going to be important to keep that up to date, and so that it is current and it's beneficial to people. So that said, and I wondered if I should have flipped these two around, being educated, and you kind of need to be educated to do what I just talked about, to be ready, but I am putting it here. So a couple of things you're going to want to know here in the be educated. You're going to want to know who you need to know about, and then you're going to want to know how this works in your area. So you will, who are the people? Identify the key people. And I'm talking here by name. So who are the officials that you that matter in your area? Who are the people in the executive level? And there's the executive level, mostly you're going to want to know about, and then the other one would be the legislative level. And then there's the different levels of our government. So that goes from your city up to the county, probably, because there's county boards and county chairs and those types of people. There's city boards, city council, the chair of the city council. The mayor would be like the executive of the local area. You go up to state, which the governor would be the executive of that, and then you would have state senators and state representatives. There's minority leaders, majority leaders, there's their staff. So all these different type of people you're going to want to identify. Chiefs of staff, but again, maybe it's not actually the chief of staff who's informing the person. Maybe there's a selected person in that office of your local state senator who is the person who talks to these people, and finding out who those different people are that you should be talking to. And then second, is the policy, the process. What is that policy process? And it could be different on any of those different levels I've just talked about, from the city to the national level. Most of the things I think that we're talking about today and that you're probably going to be doing are not on a national level, but your state representative is someone who probably takes care of your county and maybe a couple more. So that is somebody that is good to know. Jennifer just described there's federal money that's coming down now. so that person would maybe be a person to know in that situation. The other thing you want to know about legislative process or to keep in mind is, are there mandates or anything that out there that you should know about in your interest area? And like I said, all this type of information here is basically what's going to feed into what I just talked about getting your systems kind of in place and identifying all the people. So, and Jennifer I think she said this for me, but making this easy for your staff. So this isn't something that most people know how to do. And then there's also, it's just not something that the people have done. There's not a lot of training for it unless you are a lobbyist. And I'm not sure there's a lobby school you go to. I think a lot of times those people just kind of figure it out through doing it. So the easier you can make this for people, the better. And when I say that, I mean for all kinds of people. So for your board, for your staff, for volunteers, for your clients, for that core group of people that that care about you, having the plan, telling them what the plan is, sharing all this information, that historical record that I talked about. That's something you would want to let them know about, let them read, or let them, and that might be what would be in a policy binder of sorts. So providing them scripts. Do you have key points that you want to make? Sometimes organizations have a person that they, that can do the talking, or a few people, because it's something more sensitive, that they don't want anybody out there doing it. And that's fine. Let people know that though, and so that people can direct to that person or give them a really short thing that they can say. You don't want people to go, I don't know anything. I can't, you have to talk to so-and-so. You don't want them to be able to at least say something. Give them key points and let them make it their own. Let them make it come from their voice, what you need to say. Let them know rules. Let them know what they can do and can't do. What does this really look like? That's most of this. If they just keep it focused on education and not telling people what to do, they can pretty much do it. So letting them know that, sharing that system of systems that I just described, letting them have access to that and so that they can get the information that they need. Baking it in. So even people that, your whole staff, I think should be educated on this, even though they're not doing it actively, but just keeping them posted on how this can all work and just keeping, so that it's in their forefront. We always talk about when we do fundraising classes, and for those of you that are involved in development, this is not unlike that. There's just kind of that thing that you always look for, that opportunity to just share with that person who might one day, be helpful to you. This is not unlike that. So just keeping in mind the opportunity to educate. Having a case statement, which is an internal document that you have about your organization, just provides information and, again, facts in a different way to then present to other people. Slogans, persuasive statements, things like that, anything like that you want to share with people. Treasure hunts. I liked what Jennifer said about going to a state capitol, those field trips down to Jefferson City or something, just sort of exploring around and finding out what is available to, going and meeting the people, knocking on doors, things like that. Be a thought leader. There are nonprofits have two sources of power. One is valuable information. You guys know things that, the average person doesn't. You have expertise. You have expertise on your clients, on the work you're doing, on the experience of your clients. You also are a voice of people who care. So you are not in it. The staff, the staff a little bit more because they are being paid, but boards, volunteers. You're working for other people. Nonprofits work for other people. They work for the people they serve. So your voice carries weight. And so being aware of that, position yourself as a resource, be that expert. I know UMKC gets called from KCUR fairly often. I'm often hearing, them bringing somebody in. There's a an ethics professor that I hear quite often there. I know that our public administration staff gets called just to weigh in on a topic, you know, on different shows. Be that person that they call, be the one they call, be at the table. So, you know, if we think about hunger in Kansas City, we can probably pretty much figure that Harvesters is going to be in that discussion. If we're looking at sexual assault or sexual issues in Kansas City, attacks and things like that, Moxa is going to be at that table. If we are concerned about adult literacy or adults who didn't get didn't graduate high school and want to go beyond a GED, but actually get a high school equivalency, we're going to think about Literacy Kansas City. So thinking about this, what table should you be at? If, you know, the old saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the table, or you're on the menu or something like that. But really thinking about which of these, what table should you be at to talk about your issues? It's just about relationships, which I talked about a little bit. That's what nonprofits do. You know, we make relationships, and those build trust. So that's what's really important. Relationships will build trust. These are the different types of relationships, who we have them with. We have them with officials, the people that are making the decisions, the people with about funding, those people that care about us. You never know who's going to be in that place. So anybody that cares about you, continue to do that. And then obviously the media. And then how do we do that? As Jennifer said, we invite them to things, we host them, we, you know, whether they come or not, still include them, listen to what they say. You can learn a lot of, you know, about what they care about, their priorities, keeping them informed. And then thank them for, much like you would do in a fundraising. This is slightly different, but it's still about educating and just sharing your story. Building relationships goes from going for the top, that executive person, and there's a couple ways you can do it. You can kind of come from the bottom and go through their staff, or you can kind of go directly, understanding what directly their priorities are. As I talked about, I learned that Sharice Davids likes to focus on mental health, and that's a good thing to know if you're in that. Having this communication channel is open is good. It allows you to pass information on to them, and then it also allows you to get information back from them. So you're going to learn about opportunities quicker. You're also going to learn about threats that might be coming down the road quicker. So those, keeping that communication open. These people, again, the same types of people in the same different layers. So the state, the local, the national, and then there's legislative and executive on both sides there. Knowing what these people care about, knowing their deadlines, knowing, you know, and this can be done by simply paying attention. So what, you know, what do their political ads say? I've been watching, and I'm not in Kansas City right now, but I know when before I left, Barbara Bollier was talking a lot about equality in healthcare. Obviously, that's something that matters to her. Listen to what they say in political ads. Listen to what they say in state-up addresses. Look at what their budgets are. Where do they kind of? What's the initial budget that comes out, the first draft? Where is the money going? And then obviously their staff is a great connector on this. You want to know why you're what you're bringing to that table. So when you do figure out which table you're supposed to be at, you want to know what you're bringing to it. You have exclusive information. What information do you have that's exclusive? You have information about your beneficiaries, about your solution, about your methods, your programs. You have information about programs and methods that didn't work. And why they didn't work, and why they won't work in that culture, that community, that environment, or something. So you're providing to these lawmakers, to policymakers, to decision makers, you're providing access to the beneficiaries, to those people that and to their world and what their world really looks like. So know what makes you unique, and know what your value is to the lawmakers. Many times, this work can be done with others in a group with others. So I think that when we have like-minded people and individuals, we come together, and it's going to make it stronger. Sometimes you just don't get heard when you're on your own. I worked with a group of neurological organizations who just kept trying to get their information to doctors, but they were like 1-2 person organizations. And when they came together, hey, we're the Neurological Coalition. That was much different than being the Stroke Foundation that had one staff person working out of their home or something. So you have a bigger voice. You can strengthen the information base, and you can also increase your participants. But you want to be cautious. So you want to make sure that when you get in a coalition that the objective and solution are the same. And just because you have the same objective, your solution, that doesn't mean that the solution is the same. Do messages and arguments align? Do you have, and that you want to make sure it hits your values different that may not there. And you want to think, I was just thinking, what is considered safe these days is not a universal definition. So making sure that you are on the same page. Is the whole greater than the sum of its parts? Is this something that probably alone or in your group, you would not be able to accomplish if you did not get with other people? Thinking about that. Is there trust in the coalition? Is everybody pulling their weight? You know, is everybody contributing financially and with time and with resources and with information? Do you feel like if not, it's probably not going to work if there starts to be mistrust in there? And then do you have leadership for the organization and capacity? So is there financial support, oftentimes a convener, someone on their own out there who independent of any of the players is a good thing to have. So just asking some of these questions as you go into a coalition. And then basically the number one thing is advocacy is always about educating. So that is what we want you to do, is just to educate the people that are making decisions and just telling them what your story is. And with that, I'm just going to open it up. If we have a couple of minutes here for any questions.
Cindy, we do have a question. Lauren Conaway asked, as a newbie in the public policy space, how can you establish credibility with legislators and key stakeholders, or is it just a time thing?
Part of it is time, but I think you can kind of speed that up by, you know, especially if there's a specific piece of legislation, you know, make sure that you are sending emails, or, you know, if it's just kind of in general wanting them to know about your organization, you know, make sure they're on the mailing list for your newsletter or e-newsletter. And then of course going, which is harder right now, but in normal times, going and meeting with them one-on-one. They will take appointments. But I was thinking about, even, I don't know how many people still have a printed newsletter, but even if you took your e-newsletter and printed it out, and if there's something specific you want them to see, have a note on the front, because most likely it will be their assistant going through their mail, and just making it as easy for them as possible to find the information you want them to know. And just keep doing that. And yeah, it does take some time, but you can get in there and they'll know who you are, and they'll start looking to your organization then for information when they need it on a specific issue.
Yeah, I agree on that. And I think this unfortunately doesn't happen overnight. And that's why, you know, I kind of did want to start with what I did, that, you know, Jennifer says all these things she did, but it's because they were prepared, and you do need to kind of lay the groundwork. It's much like in fundraising, you know, you don't get money tomorrow. I did love what you said, Jennifer, about the off time. So kind of thinking about that, and, you know, probably we're going to be in an off time in December. I mean, a lot of times these places take, you know, holidays and stuff. So maybe that's their off time. That might be a time to start, even though and to get started. And I do agree, just letting them see you out, you know, just just bombarding them, you know, you don't think they know it, but they will. Just so the more stuff you send them. And remember, they need you. I mean, they need to know, like I talked about that expert, what exclusive information do you have? They need that exclusive information. So you just got to figure out how to kind of get to them. And that's sort of one of the biggest challenges, who's the right person to talk to. But they really need this information to make the decisions they need to make. They want to know what people think.
One thing I just remembered, because a couple of my legislators will have like a monthly, anybody come and sort of like an open forum. So a lot of legislators, at least at the state and local level, will have those kinds of open opportunities on the off season usually, because otherwise they're mostly in either Topeka or Jeff City. So take advantage of those when they're expecting to see their constituents, because usually it's not crowded. So you get a lot of one-on-one time with them to just sit and chat, because they've set aside an hour or whatever to meet with their constituents sort of in an open forum. So those may still be happening via Zoom. So I would take advantage of those opportunities as well right now.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? I had one in the chat just to me about how to get on for alerts. So once you figure out what organizations you want to be more a part of, most of the time, I mean, that's what they do. So they make it usually pretty obvious on their homepage how to sign up for their alerts. So that just the hard part for all of us is to figure out which are the best organizations for us and for our particular missions for our organizations.
And most of the officials too will have I believe most of the ones in the local area have emails that come out weekly. I get them from most of my, national people. And so, and that's pretty easy to find too, just how to get it. And then you'll just know what they're doing and what they're up to. Some of them will even, have a lot of things about inviting you, like letting you know where they're going to be, like Jennifer described, so you can go meet them. But
Jennifer?
Yes.
I'd be curious, and we just have such little time left, but I'm thinking of some of the political fraught endeavors with advocacy. And two examples come to my mind with the Ballet is you all seem successful in securing funding, government funding for downtown, your downtown campus, whereas UMKC, it seemed they had a kind of on again, off again experience with the Missouri government and trying to secure funding for their downtown arts campus. And ultimately, I think decided against it. The other example that comes to my mind is the National Endowment for the Arts always seems to be conjuring up political controversy. So I'm just curious, any insights from your end of how to thread that needle? You're not advocating for a political position or a political candidate, a stance, but you're trying to secure government funding for the good work and the core mission of the Ballet. Any insights from you on that?
So just really quickly, the money the Ballet got from the state for our Bolster Center downtown was a different source. So it was state historic tax credits, which is different. As long as we, followed the rules and were qualified, we could get those. Whereas for the UMKC downtown campus, it was all but secured except for the governor vetoing the funding. So that was more about having to have a strong advocate, which we did, fortunately, to talk to legislators about the need. So it was successful up until the governor, who got kicked out before a year in office. So, and then In terms of nationally, the NEA has had its ups and downs and doesn't have a lot of money right now. And who knows, probably with what's ahead, it may not have a lot either, unless we go something back like way during the Roosevelt New Deal, where there was the public works project and there were artists involved with that. So, yeah.
Okay, great. I think we're at the end of our time.